He woke up screaming in a small apartment in Prague, clutching his chest where the sword had gone through. But there was no wound. There was never a wound, just the memory of dying 700 years ago, over and over again, every single night. His name was Gabriel Rousseau, though that wasn't the name he was born with. That name had been lost to history, buried somewhere in the ashes of a Friday the 13th that changed everything. He was 28 years old when the king's men came for the Templars in 1307. He was 28 years old now, in 2019, and he had been 28 years old for longer than he could bear to remember. Immortality, he'd learned, wasn't a gift. It was a prison sentence with no possibility of parole. Gabriel had tried everything to die. He'd thrown himself from cliffs, walked into fires, let diseases ravage him until his body should have been nothing but a husk. And every time he woke up whole again, gasping for air in whatever century he'd landed in, condemned to keep living while everyone he'd ever loved turned to dust. He'd stopped trying decades ago. Now he just existed, moving from city to city every few years before people noticed he never aged. He worked as a translator, fluent in languages most people had forgotten existed. It was a quiet life, a hollow life, but it was the only one he had. That morning in Prague, he did what he always did. He made coffee, dark and bitter, and walked to the small cafe where he spent his mornings pretending to be normal. The October air was cold, carrying with it the smell of rain and old stone. He liked Prague. The city remembered things too, carried its scars openly in cobblestones and Gothic spires. He was stirring sugar into his second cup when she walked in. She was young, maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back in a loose braid and eyes that seemed too old for her face. She wore a cream-colored sweater and carried a leather journal under one arm. Nothing about her should have caught his attention. But when her eyes met his across the cafe, she froze. The journal slipped from her hands and hit the floor with a slap that made everyone look up. She stared at him like she'd seen a ghost. Gabriel looked away quickly, his heart hammering in a way it hadn't in centuries. He knew that look. He'd seen it exactly twice before, both times ending in disaster. Once in 1847 from a woman in Boston who'd screamed and called him a demon. Once in 1923 from a priest in Barcelona who'd tried to exorcise him. The woman picked up her journal with shaking hands, but she didn't leave. She walked straight to his table and sat down without asking. "You," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I know you." Gabriel kept his expression neutral, though ice flooded his veins. "I don't think so. I'm not from Prague." "Not from now," she said, and her eyes filled with tears. "From before, from—" She pressed her palm to her forehead, squeezing her eyes shut. "God, this is insane."
I sound insane.
He should have left. He should have walked out and disappeared into the city and never looked back. But something in her voice held him frozen in his chair. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Emma Klein." She opened her journal with trembling fingers and flipped through pages covered in sketches and frantic handwriting. "I've been having these dreams for 3 years. Every night. The same ones. I thought I was losing my mind, so I started drawing them, writing everything down." She turned the journal toward him. "Then I came to Prague 2 days ago and I saw you on the street." And I knew I wasn't crazy. Gabriel looked down at the page and felt the world tilt. It was him, sketched in charcoal but unmistakably him, wearing the white mantle and red cross of a Templar knight. And next to that drawing was another. A fortress, soldiers surrounding it with torches, men in chains, and in the corner of the page, a date written in her handwriting, October 13th, 1307, his coffee cup shattered in his hand. He didn't remember squeezing it. Hot liquid and ceramic shards scattered across the table as other patrons turned to stare. "How?" The word came out strangled. "How do you know that date?" Emma was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "Because I was there. I don't know how, I don't know why, but I was there. I remember." Her voice broke. "I remember watching you die." Gabriel's breath came in short gasps. In 7 centuries, no one had ever remembered. No one had ever known. He'd been utterly alone with his curse, and now this woman, this stranger, was sitting across from him with tears in her eyes, telling him she'd witnessed his death. "Tell me," he said, his voice raw. "Tell me what you remember." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "It's fragmented, like memories that aren't mine but also are. I remember stone walls and screaming, men being dragged from their beds. You were trying to hide something, some kind of artifact wrapped in cloth. They caught you in a chapel. She met his eyes. They ran you through with a sword. You died looking up at a rose window. Gabriel couldn't breathe. The rose window. He hadn't thought about that detail in centuries, had tried to bury it along with everything else from that night. But she was right. He'd died staring up at colored glass, watching his own blood pool beneath him while his brothers screamed in the distance. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I don't know." Emma's hands shook as she closed the journal. "I'm an art history professor from Seattle. I have a normal life, a normal past. No connection to any of this. But 3 years ago the dream started. Every night I die in different ways. Burned at the stake, drowned, hanged, and in every dream, you're there. Sometimes we're friends, sometimes lovers. Once I think you were my brother." She laughed, but it was a broken sound. "I've died 100 times in my dreams, Gabriel, and you've been there for all of them." He hadn't told her his name. "How do you know what to call me?" "I just know, the same way I knew I'd find you here if I kept looking." She leaned forward. "I don't believe in reincarnation. I don't believe in past lives. I'm a rational person, but I can't explain this any other way. Can you?" Gabriel stared at her, his mind racing. In all his centuries of searching for answers, of reading every occult text and consulting every mystic who might explain his curse, he'd never considered this possibility. That someone else might be caught in the same loop, that someone might remember. "I need to show you something," he said. They left the cafe and walked through Prague's winding streets until they reached his apartment. It was sparse, temporary looking, because that's what his life had become. But in the bedroom, hidden beneath a loose floorboard, was a metal box. He'd carried it across centuries, the only physical proof that his past was real. Inside were 13 rings, knights' rings, each bearing the Templar cross. He'd collected them from his brothers' bodies that night before the king's men could strip them away as evidence of heresy. It was all he had left of the only family he'd ever known. Emma gasped when she saw them. Then she reached into her own bag and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. "I bought this at an antique shop in Berlin 3 months ago," she said. "I didn't know why. I just knew I had to have it." She unwrapped it. It was a ring, a Templar ring, the 14th ring, Gabriel's ring, the one he'd been wearing when he died. That should have been lost to history. "That's impossible," he breathed. "I watched them take that from my body." "Maybe," Emma said softly. "Nothing about this is possible. Maybe we stopped being bound by possible a long time ago." They talked for hours as afternoon faded into evening. She told him about her dreams, and he told her about his reality. 700 years of watching the world change while he remained frozen. The loneliness of it, the weight of carrying memories that belonged to a dead world. And slowly, as they talked, a theory began to form. "What if we're connected?" Emma said. "What if when you didn't die that night, when something kept you here, it created a tear in whatever fabric separates one life from the next? And I'm caught in it somehow, living echoes of lives I'm supposed to forget? Then why you?" Gabriel asked. "Why now after all this time?" Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she opened her journal again, to a page near the back. It was filled with dates and locations, all of them marking moments from her dreams. "I die in these dreams," she said slowly. "But I'm starting to realize something. I don't die random deaths. I die in places where you are, times when you're alive." She looked up at him. "What if I'm not remembering past lives at all? What if I'm dying over and over in different timelines, in different versions of history, and every time I find you?" The implications of that hit Gabriel like a physical blow. "You think we're trapped in a loop?" "I think you're trapped," she corrected. "And somehow I keep getting pulled back to you. Different faces, different names, but always the same ending. I find you and then I die." "Then we end this now," Gabriel said, standing abruptly. "You leave Prague. You forget you ever saw me. I won't let you. It's too late." Emma's voice was calm, resigned. "Don't you see? It was always too late. The moment you survived that night 700 years ago, the moment you broke the natural order, you set this in motion. I'm not here by accident. I'm here because this is where I'm supposed to be." "I won't accept that." "You don't have a choice." She smiled sadly. "Neither of us do." That night, Gabriel dreamed for the first time in centuries. Not the nightmare of his death, but something new. He dreamed of Emma in different forms. A peasant girl who brought him bread when he was imprisoned. A nurse in a field hospital during the Civil War, holding his hand as he pretended to die. A young mother in 1940s Paris who hid him from the Nazis. In every dream, she found him. In every dream, she saved him or tried to. And in every dream, she paid for it with her life. He woke with tears on his face and found Emma sitting by his window, watching the sunrise over Prague. "I dreamed about you," he said. "I know, I could feel it." She turned to look at him. "We're running out of time, Gabriel. I can feel it. This version of me isn't meant to last much longer. Then I'll protect you. I've had 700 years to learn how to survive. I can keep you safe." Emma shook her head. "You can't protect me from fate. But maybe." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point isn't to save me. Maybe the point is to finally let go. I don't understand. You've been holding on for 7 centuries. To your guilt? To your brothers? To the night you should have died? What if the reason you can't die is because you won't forgive yourself? And what if the reason I keep finding you is to show you that some things are worth dying for? That death isn't always the tragedy?" She crossed the room and took his hands. "I'm not afraid anymore. These dreams, they've shown me something beautiful. That across time, across death, across impossible odds, souls find each other. We find each other. That's not a curse, Gabriel. That's grace." The next 3 days were the most alive Gabriel had felt in centuries. They explored Prague together, talking about everything and nothing. She showed him the world through her eyes, full of wonder he'd forgotten how to feel. And he showed her the ghosts he'd been carrying, finally speaking aloud the names of his fallen brothers. On the 4th day, Emma collapsed in the middle of Charles Bridge. The doctors said it was a brain aneurysm, impossible to predict, impossible to prevent. She had hours at most. Gabriel sat beside her hospital bed, holding her hand, watching her slip away. "I told you," she whispered, her voice weak but her eyes clear. "It was always going to end like this. I should have done more. I should have—" "Stop." She squeezed his hand with what little strength she had left. "You did exactly what you needed to do. You let me in. After 700 years of being alone, you let someone know you. That's everything. I don't want to lose you." "You won't." Her breathing was labored now. "Don't you see? You'll carry me with you, the way you've carried your brothers. And maybe that's what this was all about. Teaching you that love doesn't end with death. That memory is its own kind of immortality." Emma died as the sun set, her hand in his, a slight smile on her face. And Gabriel broke. He sobbed for the first time since 1307, great heaving cries that shook his entire body. He grieved for Emma, for his brothers, for every person he'd lost across 7 centuries of unwanted life. He let it all out, every drop of pain he'd been holding back. When the tears finally stopped, something inside him felt different. Lighter. He left the hospital and walked through the night, her journal clutched to his chest. As dawn broke over Prague, he found himself at the Vltava River, watching the water flow endlessly forward. And then he felt it, a warmth in his chest, spreading outward. His heart beating in a rhythm it hadn't followed in centuries. The rhythm of something mortal, something finite. He was aging. Finally, after 700 years, time was catching up with him. Gabriel pulled out Emma's journal and opened it to the last page. In her handwriting, she'd written a single line. "When you're ready to stop running, look up." He looked up. The sky was full of stars fading in the dawn, and for the first time in his impossibly long life, Gabriel felt at peace. He didn't know how much time he had left. Days, months, maybe years, but it would be enough, because Emma had been right. The curse hadn't been immortality. The curse had been refusing to accept that some stories end, and that's what makes them beautiful. He was ready now, ready to live whatever time he had left fully, without fear, and ready when the time came to die, not as a Templar alone in the dark, but as a man who'd been loved, who'd been remembered, who'd finally learned to let go.